be transgender against the wishes of her ex-husband, the father, and it just didn't seem appropriate to lead off with music. So anyway, this story was actually reported a few days ago in the Federalist. The boy's name is James when he's with his dad, and Luna when he's with his mom and at school. And normally I wouldn't show pictures of the kid when discussing a story like this, but some concerned family friends of the dad have actually created this website, SaveJames.com, and they want people to see and share this fact sheet that they've prepared in order to spread awareness about James' situation, and so I decided to go ahead and support their efforts. So this is a brief overview of the story from their perspective, and keep in mind that the mom and her supporters will obviously have a different narrative, but she's very wrong here in what she's doing, and I will explain why. Alright, here's the background. Our friend Jeff has twin 6-year-old boys, James and Jude. Jeff is currently in a very tenuous custody battle as he and his ex-wife each fight for full custody. When the boys were 3 years old, Jeff's ex-wife decided that James should not be a boy. She began dressing him as a girl, calling him by the name Luna, and enrolled him in social transitioning therapy to prepare him for chemical castration. This process can begin at age 8. She has enrolled him in Koppel School as a girl. He is currently in 1st grade. The teachers and administrators know that he is a boy, but the other parents and students are unaware. As you can imagine, this is very confusing for the child and his brother. Courts have enjoined Jeff from dressing James as a boy at school, from teaching him that he is a boy, and from sharing religious teachings on sexuality and gender. And lastly, he has been accused of abuse for saying that his son is a boy. Alright, so pretty awful situation, right? Especially with the twin brother also being involved here, and it's actually not unusual for only one twin to be trans. A lot of trans activists will tell you that transgenderism is strongly biologically determined, but if you look at the largest trans twin study to date, which was published in 2013 by Dr. Milton Diamond, his group found that out of 74 identical twin pairs, only 28% were concordant, meaning that only about a quarter of the twin pairs examined had both twins diagnosed as trans, and this led them to conclude that environmental factors trump any biological predisposition. And a report from the American College of Pediatricians from earlier this month goes on to corroborate this, stating that a high 72% discordance rate among identical twins proves that no one is born predetermined to have gender dysphoria, let alone predetermined to identify as transgender or transsexual. And I think we have more evidence to support this idea in James's case. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a detailed account of the specific behaviors the mom noticed in James when he was a toddler that prompted her to take him down this path, but here's what was reported in the Federalist article. 6-year-old James is caught in a gender identity nightmare. Under his mom's care in Dallas, Texas, James obediently lives as a trans girl named Luna, but given the choice when he's with his dad, he's all boy, his sex at birth. In their divorce proceedings, the mother has charged the father with child abuse for not affirming James as transgender, has sought restraining orders against him, and is seeking to terminate his parental rights. She is also seeking to require him to pay for the child's visits to a transgender-affirming therapist and transgender medical alterations, which may include hormonal sterilization starting at age 8. When his mother, who is a pediatrician by the way, took James for counseling, she chose a gender transition therapist who diagnosed him with gender dysphoria, a mental conflict between physical sex and perceived gender. James's precious young life hinges purely on the diagnosis of gender dysphoria by a therapist who wraps herself in rainbow colors, affirms the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and dismisses evidence to the contrary. The diagnosis is critical because labeling a child with gender dysphoria can trigger a series of physical and mental consequences for the child and has legal ramifications in the ongoing custody case. Get it wrong and young James's life is irrevocably harmed, obviously. So those are the stakes here, and the main argument in this piece is that James doesn't even meet the basic criteria to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria to begin with. And the criteria are actually very strict, and it's different for children versus adults. Here's the criteria for children, and you need at least 6 of these, as well as significant distress that lasts at least 6 months. 1. A strong desire to be of the other gender or an insistence that one is the other gender. Number 2, a strong preference for wearing clothes typical of the opposite gender. 3, a strong preference for cross-gender roles in make-believe play or fantasy play. 4, a strong preference for the toys, games, or activities stereotypically used or engaged in by the other gender. 5, a strong preference for playmates of the other gender. 6, a strong rejection of toys, games, and activities typical of one's assigned gender. 7, a strong dislike of one's sexual anatomy. And number 8, a strong desire for the physical sex characteristics that match one's experienced gender. Alright, so those are the criteria. Now let's review some of the counter evidence provided in this piece, and you tell me in the comments if you think James was diagnosed correctly. James's mom is all in on the diagnosis of gender dysphoria and assisting with social transition. She used the name Luna to enroll him as a girl in first grade and provides only female clothes. Meanwhile, Dad isn't seeing signs of gender dysphoria. In the father's home, James appears to be a normal boy and doesn't identify as a girl. He has a choice of boys' or girls' clothes there, and he chooses to dress as a boy. The fact that James changes gender identity depending on which parent is present makes the diagnosis of gender dysphoria both dubious and harmful. And this next part is really revealing. The transition therapist has observed that James is not consistent, insistent, or persistent in the desire to become Luna. For example, a dossier filed with the Dallas court says that, under the skilled eyes of the therapist, the child was presented 2 pieces of paper, one with the word James and one with the word Luna, and asked to pick the name he preferred. When the appointment only included his mother, James selected Luna. When the appointment was only with his father, however, James pointed to the boy named James, not the girl name. And so naturally, the glaring disparity between a child's preferred identity when in the presence of one parent versus the other should cause the therapist to reassess, perhaps nullify the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, and terminate any steps toward transition. But in the case of James, this hasn't happened. So there's even more examples of eyewitness accounts refuting James's diagnosis in this article, and I'll link it below with the other references, but here's the bottom line from the author. If we do not save James from a misdiagnosis, his next step is chemical castration at age 8, only 2 years away. James needs a more comprehensive psychological assessment to explore why he identifies as a girl with mom and as a boy with dad. I want to do what I can to save James from his gender nightmare and to raise awareness about how easily children can be misdiagnosed and labeled as gender dysphoric and the extensive damage that can cause in their young lives. A questionable diagnosis locks a vulnerable child into an alternate gender identity long before they can understand what is happening or where it might lead. It's up to the adults to observe the child carefully, consider and question the gray areas, and ultimately guard innocent children against hasty diagnoses and conclusions about something so fundamental as their gender identity. Exactly. You know, regardless of your views on transgenderism and what types of treatments you support, I think we should all at least be able to agree that there's more than enough evidence and doubt here about James's psychology and preferences to hold off on the permanent medical interventions that the mom is seeking. I trust that reasonable people would exercise restraint and patience here and at least allow James to be evaluated by some other professionals, but unfortunately the mom does not seem to want to do that. She was already granted a court order giving her the exclusive right to manage the psychiatric and psychological care of the twins, and recently she submitted a petition asking the court to modify the previous order and basically give her even more control of the kids. There's 35 pages here, but I just want to highlight this section with her list of demands because it's pretty ridiculous. She wants him to stop cutting the hair of the children. Number 4, she wants the court to enter orders requiring the father to affirm Luna and honor her choices both inside and outside the home, including limiting father's consecutive overnight possession of both children and/or supervising father's possession if he fails to affirm Luna. And also this one's pretty crazy. She wants to enjoin the father from engaging in non-affirming behavior and/or taking Luna outside the home as James or allowing others to do so. She wants him to take educational classes, ordering father to attend counseling and/or educational classes associated with being the parent of a transgender child or potentially transgender child. Specifically, a class that educates father how his actions and non-affirming behavior could be harmful to the child's emotional and well-being. Yeah, and what about chemically castrating an 8-year-old? I mean, you guys get the idea. This mom has lost it. I honestly can't imagine what the father is going through. The mom did state that it's unclear whether or not he's done anything that rises to the standard of family violence, so I'm hoping he didn't. If he did, then he's wrong. He really just needs to work within the system now, no matter how frustrating it gets. Otherwise, he's going to lose his kids to this crazy woman. And again, just to conclude, my personal view based on everything I've studied about transgenderism so far is that starting hormone therapy on potentially trans children is never appropriate and arguably a form of child abuse, especially if both parents aren't even in agreement and when there's clear evidence that the initial diagnosis was incorrect, as in this case. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Also, in this video, I've probably said over 100 words and phrases that will be scanned by the YouTube algorithm, which will then mark it as mature, which means it's probably not going to be promoted widely to the greater YouTube audience. But I think that this was important, and if you agree with me, then please share it because it's the only way to counter the algorithm. And one more thing, even if our channel was monetized, a video like this is is about as advertiser unfriendly as it gets, so it would probably get demonetized anyway. But again, I think it's important for us to do videos on controversial topics from time to time. So if you'd like to support us in continuing to do that, please check out our crowdfunding links below. All right, take care, guys. I'm going to leave you with this clip from Dr. Michelle Cretella. She's president of the American College of Pediatrics, and this is her speculating about what might be going on with James's mom. I'll see you guys in the next one.
What do you think would be the best thing for James in this situation?
The ideal approach here should be with a therapist who will objectively look at James and the very difficult situation they're in. This is a divorce situation. And basically assess what's different about when James is with mom and with James is with dad. There are cases now, I don't know these parents personally, but there is definitely the case in which some mothers in particular can experience gender mourning. Moms who so desperately wanted a girl but never gave birth to a daughter can enter a deep depression, and that depression is only lifted when one of their sons acts in an effeminate way or allows the mom to dress them as a girl. So there are cases like this in the literature. So basically a therapist